Hello, everyone. In this session, we want to take a look at configuring volume shadow copying. What is volume shadow copying? Well, this is a feature in Server 2012 that creates copies of files at specific points in time or set intervals that you yourself would set. You can use this feature to restore previous versions of files and folders. Also, this feature protects you from accidentally losing important files in a network share. Remember that when users delete files over the network, those files are permanently deleted. Now, because shadow copies enable users to view previous versions of files, the feature then allows them to restore a backup of a deleted file. Let's look at an example here. Let us say that we have a file called my file, and that file is in a shared folder on your network drive. When volume shadow copying is turned on and the person creates a file, the system takes a snapshot or a copy of that file. When there's a change to the file or something is added to the file, then a snapshot is taken of that change. The snapshots are taken according to intervals set by you, or if you don't set any intervals at all, the system has a default time that it will take a snapshot. So you would have had created a file maybe at 6 a.m. If you had your system or your schedule for volume shadow copying set to take a snapshot at 7 a.m., then at 7 a.m., the system would take a snapshot of that file. At 12 a.m., the system will take another snapshot of the file. The next day, at 7 a.m., another snapshot. And then that same day, at 12, another snapshot. So you can have up to 64 versions of the same file stored on your network drive using this feature, volume shadow copying. Let's look at some advantages of using shadow copying on shared folders. You will be able to restore or recover files which have been accidentally deleted or which perhaps might have become corrupt. The prior version of files can be copied to the same location or another location. If you by mistake have overwritten a file, which sometimes happens, you can still go to the previous version of that file and be able then to restore that file. Another thing that you can do is that you can compare changes between a current version that you have and maybe another version that you had a few hours before or the day before. Some important points about volume shadow copying. You have to configure them on an NTFS volume class, and they're configured on a volume basis. You should make sure that you have at least 300 megabits of free volume space. The minimum requirement probably would be around 100. The maximum is 10% of the volume's free disk space by default. And you cannot use volume shadow copying as a method for backup. This is the reason. You can only store 64 shadow copies. When that limit is reached, the oldest shadow copy is permanently deleted and cannot be restored. So, take note, shadow copies should not be utilized to replace performing regular backups of your data. We now want to go ahead and take a look to see how we actually configure shadow copying on our server drive. We're going to be configuring shadow copying on the C drive of our server. And we begin by opening the File Explorer. And we have the local C drive here. Please note that it is best to turn on shadow copying on a separate drive other than the system drive. So if you have a drive D or drive E, where you store your user data, your shared folders, that is the drive that you should configure shadow copying on. For our purposes, here we're going to use drive C. So we're going to right click on the local drive C and we're going to click on Properties. We want to select Shadow Copies tab and we want to enable shadow copies. Notice that we already have 2 shares on the drive C. So we're going to click Enabled. After clicking Enable, we see here that we have a little warning, and the warning says if you enable shadow copies, Windows will use the default schedule settings. So Windows has default schedule settings at a time when your folder will be copied at set intervals, but you can go and you can change those. So we're going to go ahead and say yes, we can or we want to enable shadow copying. Now here you see the volume, and we want to look at settings. So we're going to click on the settings tab, and the settings tab show us the limit, the amount of space that we can use for shadow copying. We can say that there's no limit, or you can go and you can choose your own limit right here. You can click the down or up arrow and choose the limit that you would want. Please note that you need at least 300 megabyte free space to create a shadow copy. We want to then click on the schedule, and notice that it gives you the default schedule, creates 2 shadow copies per day. Avoid creating shadow copies more frequently than once per hour. So we're going to click on schedule. And here we can see that the default time is 7 a.m. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of every week. And I think there's another default time at 12. And you can choose whether you want weekly, monthly, daily. You can choose the start time. You can make changes with the days. We want to click on New to create a new schedule. And here we already have a schedule at 9 a.m. every day. So we're going to just change that time to 10 by clicking the up arrow here, so that we now have snapshots to be taken at 10 a.m. every day. Let's click on the Advanced tab and see what settings are on the Advanced tab. For the advanced tab, you can, so you have your start date here. You can put an end date. You can say that you're going to repeat the task every day, every month, every week. The duration in hours. And you have a checkbox that's saying if the task is still running, stop it at this time. So these are some advanced schedule options that you can come in here and set. Let's click on OK to close this box. And we want to click on OK to continue. Here on the settings page again, you have those settings that we talked about, the maximum size, the schedule. I'm going to click on OK to continue. And what we want to do now is to click on Create Now. So we're going to go ahead and click on Create Now. And that's how you recreate the shadow copying. We're going to say OK and close the box. Now we want to look at the shared folders. We're going to double click on that C drive. We're going to go to one of our shared folders, right click on the folder and click on Properties. Then we want to click on the Previous Version tab. And we can see here that we have 2 copies of that folder, and we have one snapshot was at 449 and the other was at 451. Please note that you can open, copy, or restore your data from the Sales Data Sort Properties box. Remember that you are able to recover files that have been deleted, that have been corrupted. You'll be able to go to previous versions of files. Let's click on OK. And we're going to close the local drive C. That is the end of this demonstration of configuring shadow copies. Thank you for listening.